Good evening, and thank you very much for joining me this evening to talk about my newly released book, In Bed with Wall Street. Before we get into that, first off, I want to thank my great good friend John Cuneo and his partners here at Cuneo, Gilbert, and LaDuca for graciously hosting us this evening. So thank you very much for that. I wouldn't be here if I didn't have some truly great women behind me. First off, I want to thank my editor at Palgrave Macmillan, Emily Carlton, and her team. So thanks to them. I want to thank my agent, Cynthia Zigmund at Second City Publishing, who found me in early 2012. I wasn't even thinking of writing a book until Cynthia asked, how come you haven't written a book? I want to thank my publicists at Merrill Media, Merrill Moss Media, Merrill Moss, and Sarah Hausman. As they say, behind every good man there's a better woman or better women, and I've got a great team. Most of all, I really want to thank my wife. Honestly, without my wife, I wouldn't have had a blog. She's been amazing. I mean, teaching herself how to write code and to grow the blog. And again, without the blog, there's no book. So most of you know me as having a background in finance. I've been worked on the sell side of Wall Street for not quite 25 years. I've been in and around Wall Street for the last 30 years. And the one thing that I heard when I was trading on Wall Street was the manager would come over and say, Larry, what's your position? They'd ask me that at 7:30 in the morning, at 8:15, at noontime, 6, 7, 8, 9 times a day. What's your position? And the position could fluctuate depending on what was going on in the market. I'm sure there are many people around this town as well, around Washington, constantly being asked, what's your position? Oftentimes it's best to find out what the other person's position is, perhaps before stating your own. But just for a frame of, to kind of frame the context of what my position is in writing this book, before I get into some of the topics on the book, I think it would be helpful, perhaps if I just kind of frame the context of my background just a little bit so that people will really have a sense for who I am and what courses through the pages in this book. I'm one of 8 kids. I grew up in the neighborhood section of Boston, 7 boys. And in that sort of environment, there was one thing you had to do. You had to compete. If you weren't competing, you were falling behind, or you weren't even involved in the game to begin with. So I was the 6th out of 8 kids. Again, 7 boys. If you weren't competing, you were going to get beaten up or left behind, so you had to compete. We looked down or all kind of frowned upon people in the neighborhood, and again, within about a 250 square yard, there were about 25 other kids. We'd look down on maybe the kids who weren't competing, but worse than not competing, and this plays out in this book, were the kids who cheated. The kids who cheated, honestly, I'll leave it to your mental imagination. It wasn't a pretty sight. So that was a core part of my character. You know, this competing, growing up in a city neighborhood, riding the Orange Line into the Boston Public Latin School, going in there as an early teen and sitting in this auditorium and looking up in this hallway and seeing names like Hancock, Adams, Bulfinch. He's the fellow who actually was the architect for the U.S. Capitol. And to sit there as an early teen, the weight of this intellectual curiosity and this intellectual capital, that had a formative impact on me. This intellectual curiosity and having teachers challenge me at a very early time. What's your case? Support your case. Again, that plays out in this book. In short order, I made my way to the College of the Holy Cross, which we would consider the finest Jesuit institution in the country. Said with all due respect to those in this neighborhood who go to also a great Jesuit school here in Washington over at Georgetown. So, but at Holy Cross, we were competing to win on and off the field. So again, this whole sense of competition. But again, what was it that the Jesuits taught us? Pursue the truth. Pursue the truth, make your premise, support your case, and do it unceasingly. That also had a formative impact on me as I was developing. As fate would have it, I did have the benefit of an older brother who made his way to Wall Street. I went down and visited him during my senior year at Holy Cross, and I knew right away, this is the place for me. These are my kind of people, the pace, the competition, the markets, figuring things out, the intellectual curiosity, all this sort of stuff. And I owe a debt of gratitude to Larry Fink, whom I would define currently as the king of Wall Street, for giving me the opportunity at a very early age to come onto the mortgage desk at First Boston. Truth be told, I probably did not appreciate just how great an opportunity that was at that point in time. But they weren't going too far out on a limb. They offered me a 2-year commitment. Like most young guys out of college, it was 2 years, then go back and get your MBA. I told Larry in very short order, the job that I wanted was right there on the trading desk. He responded and said, well, you're not going to know anything for a year, so go get me a cup of coffee and keep your nose clean. Perhaps I got a little bit lucky. I always tried to make as many friends as possible and be as value added. I did get my opportunity on the trading desk. I never did get that MBA, but so be it. Stayed 7 years at First Boston. When Wall Street, to be honest with you, in these certain sectors of the market, it gets very small very quickly. Reputation is everything because everybody knows each other. Who's the good guys? Who's maybe not quite so good? To me, there was no premium high enough on reputation. Reputation was everything. And God forbid that I ever crossed anybody and he started to perhaps speak ill of me. I never could allow that to happen. I just wanted to constantly be collecting friends and relationships so that I could have an opportunity to do business. I ended up moving to Stearns in 1990. That was a unique experience. I mean, Bear was a dramatically different firm than First Boston. From a cultural standpoint, the way that the businesses were run, I became a better businessman going to Stearns. I ended up working for an individual whom honestly I think was the single best guy to work for on Wall Street. I'm happy to mention his name. Kevin Finnerty meant the world to me from both a professional and a personal standpoint. And why was that? Kevin and I shared a value system in the sense of ethics and which permeated the business without giving anything from a competitive standpoint. And so that our run at Stearns was a great run. I stayed there for 7 years. Kevin ended up moving to UBS, and I followed him to UBS and then ultimately to JP Chase. But I also wanted to constantly be expanding my skill set. I was a trader for 15 years. I didn't want to just be a round peg in a round hole. So how do I continue this intellectual curiosity that, from my formative years, understanding risk of different products, different sectors of the market. To me, that was a way of growing my career. And so if I needed to take a step back in order to take multiple steps forward, that to me was a prudent approach. The world got very interesting in 2004, 2005, 2006, and beyond. I left JP Morgan in early '06. Whether that was divine intervention or not, who knows? At that point in time, honestly, there were definitely signs of cracks in the system. Could I have projected what would have played out 2.5 years later? No, I couldn't. But there were definitely some signs of stress. And so as a result of that, I was in no rush to go take a job at another large bank. You can oftentimes get into these large banks, but it's very difficult to actually get back out of them because they put these golden handcuffs on you. So I was afforded the opportunity to leave JP Morgan, which I took to start pursuing entrepreneurial activities, both from a business and a not-for-profit. And then the world melted down. And a friend of a friend here in DC asked me to explain to his audience at his blog what just happened with Lehman Brothers. And so I wrote a commentary. 50 people responded to that commentary. And that to me was indicative of the appetite and the demand for explain to us what's going on Wall Street. So I wrote some more commentaries and got an equal number of responses when I realized that